All right, I'm here with my new beautiful hairstyle and my coffee. The second cup, I'm ready to rock. I think I think Lance is already here. He's in the back room, but he's here, but he's not here. I can see him there, and he'll maybe show up here eventually. But I'm starting late this morning, and so I don't want to. I don't personally want to stay super long, but and Lance, I see you're back. You can come in whenever you want. As if you need my permission. But what do I want to talk about this morning? So I want to say a couple things. Sad but here, Emily. Foxman, it's so good to see you guys. And then Bad Comedy. You showed your real name and Paul treated you this morning, right? Congratulations. Paul put you in a little video, right? He clipped what you said. Whenever I do live streams, Paul, here's the thing. Paul never clips what I say in a live stream. He never is just like Luke said this cool thing in live stream. It's also I'm just here to bring other people's gold. But anyhow, I'm trying to remember what your name is. Anyhow, Paul said it because you had it on the other thing. What's up, brother Broseph? So what I want to talk about, Foxman, good to see you, brother. What I want to talk about is, because I am a little sad. I'm okay. I'm not like sad, depressed. I'm very much, I was speaking with my wife a little bit this morning, and because we had a tough, I don't know, people will maybe relate to this if they have older kids. We had a tough meal last night. We tried really hard. Pause. I gotta go get my phone. Sorry, I can't pause. This is top tier podcasting. Sorry. So we try really hard to have family meals because I think it's important. It's an important ritual, and the rituals that you do kind of make up who you are to a large degree. Where you participate, but sometimes our dinners can be a little chaotic. It's a balance of all these events and things that you do in rituals are a balance of order and chaos. I mean, you could think of it as like within like different religious liturgies and rituals. Some of them are chaotic, like a Pentecostal thing you could say is very chaotic, and like an Orthodox liturgy is very ordered, very structured. But then within that, like my priest said, I love to quote this, it's what are you doing with that conservatism and that order? You are conserving hospitality. So while it may look like an Orthodox liturgy is very structured, and it is, there's a lot of moving parts. Like, traditionally you're standing, and so you can move around. Like anybody can move around anywhere with it. Look at an icon. You're kind of move in Russia. There's a culture, in a lot of places there's cultures of moving in and out, going in the building, out of the building. Like it doesn't matter. But then at certain points, everybody's there, and wisdom let us attend. Like there's parts within the liturgy that you're really supposed to focus on, and everybody's oriented in a certain way. So I do have a home phone for our kids, kind of, because we try not to give our kids cell phones, but they're getting to the age where they're getting cell phones. My oldest has a cell phone, much to all their disappointment. So we're having dinner last night, and it's just like, it was just kind of crazy. And I was telling my wife this morning, I feel a little neutered as a parent because my kids are getting a little older. I have teenagers, and sometimes I don't know how to interact with them as a father because a lot of times they don't really listen to me. And I try to, and then I try to gently just walk them through that. And a number of things will happen. Like it'll either turn into just seemingly an endless discussion and debate, which is kind of a little bit what we were talking about in yesterday's live stream. there's a dynamic. It's a spiritual dynamic that you get into in intellectual conversations, and I've gotten very attuned to sensing, discerning the spirits. But it also happens with my kids, where it's what I call, one of my Lukeisms is non-talking talking. So there are people that are talking, but you're not really participating in the logos. You're just speaking to get your way, or to win, to either convert the other one to your side, to your opinion, to your camp, or to get out of them what you want to get out of them. It's not kind of this flow dance where both of you are open to transformation and seeing new things and evolving and growing. And with a parent-child dynamic, that's a little different, because there's an authority that a parent has that a child shouldn't have, so it's not like a peer conversation. But anyhow, I get into these conversations with them, and I'll just use my son as an illustration. My son is a wonderful person, many gifts, but I'm just using this as an illustration, so that's a caveat. And I very often, in talking to him, and I'll tell him this is something I got told as a kid too, is like, I'm like, maybe you should be a lawyer because you really like to argue. And people used to tell me that because I would argue, and I'm good at arguing. And there's a way, again, like there's a way that this is mammon, because it's a transaction. There's a way that you can use language to try to get your way. And I would argue to get your point across, to get your whatever. There's a way that you can participate in language as a mechanism, as a tool, to try to accomplish your will. And there's a way that you can participate in language, which I would say is much more flowy, much more agape, much more dialogos, where you let the spirit lead. And I and I feel like I'm decent at discerning those two things. And very often with my kids, when I try to parent them, when I try to tell them something, when I try to lead them or correct them, I feel like what often happens is they just start debating me and arguing with me, which I don't like and I don't really want to engage in. And I either try to shut down, but like, it's hard as a parent to either shut it down or please just listen to me, or then I'll try to explain it and walk through it. But you get caught in there's 1,000 ways you can get caught and stumbled up, and it's really hard. Or like my daughters will maybe be like, one of my daughters will maybe be a little snarky at me, maybe some eye rolls, or argue with me. Very rarely is it just like a, yes, Papa, I'm Papa, or sure, I'll do that, or I see what you're saying. That happens sometimes, but very often it's not. It's a struggle. And again, I try to see everything as a gift. What is that teaching me as a parent? I can just get mad and frustrated and resent them. Or I can say like, okay, God, what are you teaching me in this? This is a I would love for my kids to just be like, we think you're a good father. We trust you. We will obey you and see the wisdom that you have. But that just doesn't happen very much, and then all my kids are very high energy. They're like me. And so tables can just get kind of crazy. Dinners can get kind of crazy. And it wasn't a pleasant one. It wasn't one that I really enjoyed, and I just kind of endured. And so, like I was telling my wife this morning, again, sometimes I just sit there because one of her little wisdom bits that she's given me is try to just stay neutral. And so I try to do that, try to not have a negative interaction with them. Just keep it neutral. Maybe it's not going to be a super positive interaction, but if you keep it neutral, people will sometimes fill in the blanks, the neutrals, positively. And there's lots of examples of this. Like, I don't want to give examples because they're, but sometimes you can. If it's just neutral, like if someone won't say something, a lot of times people who are quiet, it's better to be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. A little proverb I don't take to heart, obviously. But that's true. Very often in conversations, when people don't say something, people that are quiet in conversations, I often assume I assume intelligence. Or I assume wisdom, and it is wisdom a lot of times. And so I try to just sit there quietly a lot of times and endure it without being negative. Because very often I found, like this is what I was telling my wife, one of the only ways, and again, this is a mammon thing, where I can get my kids to listen to me is if I get angry. Like if I get really angry, they'll pay attention to me and they'll listen. But I don't want to do that. And also, like, I mean, I don't know if you can imagine this, but I can be a hothead, and I'm not the Jordan Peterson Big Five temperament thing. My volatility, which is a subcategory of your neuroticism breaks down into withdrawal and volatility. I'm 93% volatility. So like I'm essentially a hothead. But that's also coupled with my agreeableness has two breakdowns. Agreeableness breaks down to politeness and compassion, but I'm also 88th percentile compassion, first percentile politeness. I have a really weird Big Five. Of course. So like you combine, this is what I was telling my wife, you combine 93% volatility with 88th percentile compassion, and you basically have a walking wound. Like I wear my heart on my sleeve. I am sad. I can get sad a lot. I can get really happy. I'm a very emotional person. And so, so that was the family thing. And then the other thing that really has me down from yesterday's live stream, honestly, it's a little bit of this little corner stuff, is Anselman's response to yesterday's live stream and comments on yesterday's live stream bummed me out. Like they make me really sad. And and again, like with Anselman, same with my kids, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do to fix it. And as Shari would say, you shouldn't try to fix anything. And I don't even want to try to fix anything. I just want to be as virginal and integrated as I can be, and as honest as I can be. I want to speak the truth in love. I want to disagree sometimes with people strongly while not being cruel and mean. So then I'd bring in the cat that was in the live stream yesterday. Twitch, our new atheist. So he was some atheist, a guy who was kind of, and then this is a word. So this came up, the word trolling, right? Everybody kind of on the online space knows what trolling is. And there's an idea of like the bridge troll, which is obviously kind of a negative connotation. It's like a knuckle dragger. But then there's also the idea of trolling, like fish trolling. It's a kind of fishing where you put out these troll lines and the fish bite onto them, so you're trolling for fish, to catch fish. So it's to be a fisher. And so trolling can have that connotation too. But I think largely, I would say in the online space, it's considered to be a pejorative. If you call someone a troll, it's not a nice thing. And so this Twitch cat was in the stream yesterday, and he popped on, I think mainly after I had left. And so I was just interacting with him in the live comments, and I put him in some timeouts and things because I'm a moderator on Grail Country, and I now have some moderators on my channel. And I would say largely, like if you are, that would be on my streams and the stuff that I'm running. If you are being mean, if you are calling names, if you are not, so I put some things there's some really good resources in the description of this video. So 3 things that I put in there are Tim Keller's How to Disagree, which I brought up many times. If any of you respect anything that I have to say to any degree, you should watch that Tim Keller video, because that's like in my canon of gold. It's wonderful. How to Disagree Well is this strand. There's a lot of strands. Tim, I just saw your comment. Isn't it beautiful? Tim said, I can't stop looking at this. Where'd he go? I can't stop looking at this one strand of hair. It's many strands, but it is lovely. That Tim Keller video is phenomenal. How to Disagree, where he says essentially, like, anytime you're interacting with anyone intellectually in a not a debate, but in a conversation about ideas, you should convey and explain their ideas in a way that not only would they accept, but they would say, that's better than I could even say it. And that's almost identical to something that Heresy's been saying in his streams and his series on the teachings of the fathers, or whatever it's called. I don't know the Hebrew, but It's really excellent, and there's one in there about how to disagree or conversing for the sake of heaven, disagreeing for the sake of heaven, where essentially that's like both of you have an idea of a higher good that neither of you fully apprehend, that you're both working to in dialogos and agape, which involves zitsum, it involves self-emptying, it involves humility. The right brain has to be the master. That's how to engage in disagreements, not these zero-sum winning competitions. So I don't know. This thing is a big thing that I'm focused on in this corner of the internet, in my streams. Heresy, boundaries, how to disagree well. What is it? TLC versus Christian YouTube. Sam came into that stream. How do we have an estuary, a community, a group of diversity, every kind of diversity there is? I'm a fan of diversity. Maybe not diversity, equity, inclusion, because that's kind of this, groupthink ideology thing, political thing. But I am a big fan of diversity, especially ideological diversity. And I would fundamentally say that Christianity is not an ideology, which means that it should have ideological diversity in it. That's a big thing that I talk about. So, all that to say, to bring it back to like the relational dynamics, I don't know. I'm very, as much as Anselman thinks I'm critical of him, which is just like, again, and I don't want to play like the measuring game. Like, am I more critical of you than you are of me? You feel pretty critical of me, Anselman. And so like, can I disagree with you at all? I mean, can we disagree with one another without being mean, without being critical, without being divisive? It's Coleridge. It's the philosopher's privilege to distinguish without division. Can we distinguish without division, without relationally breaking down? We ought to be able to do that. I want to try to model that really well. This is something that Tayo said in the live stream yesterday. I think in having a community that's diverse like this, we need to include even the people who are exclusivist. Even the zero-sum exclusivists need to be included in the group that advocates non-zero-sum exclusivism or exclusivism for future inclusion. And then what is truly heresy? What is heresy? When do you exclude someone from the group? I would argue that it's behavioral. And so if you are insistent in being repeatedly and unrepentantly, what would be the word? Sinful, abusive, missing the mark, divisive, then you have to be excluded. And like I've said before, a lot of times, like just to use church as an example, but it would apply in this corner, in Grail Country or on my channel or whatever. I think heresy can come from the top and it can come from the bottom. So often in church, just the lay people can be heretics. You can't be heretics on top. But you can if what heresy is acting divisively. So if you from the top are not loving and shepherding well, if you're not leaving the 99 for the one, if you're not acting like Christ in the world and you're insisting on your own way, you're being a heretic. You're just a heretic from the top. It's not just the heretics on the bottom who are expressing honest disagreement. Expressing honest disagreement isn't heresy. I guess that's what I would say. I mean, how can expressing honest disagreement be heresy? I just think that's nuts. So Lance, what do you have to say? I was about to say I've reached an end. I'm going to go look at comments.
I didn't want to. I was also going to start a Just Chatting. We're on spring break. I'm a CFO of a collection of schools, and they're off, so I have a little free time.
Yeah.
There's two things. First, I want to talk about. You started off talking about your expectations of your family dinner, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen 500 Days of Summer?
Yeah, it's been a long time, but yeah.
Yeah, totally knew you'd have watched that movie. It's a great movie. There's this scene where he has this expectation about how this date is going to go with this girl, and it's amazing, right? And then it immediately plays out to what really happens, really happened on it.
Yep.
And I felt like that was one of the most amazing, like it really like a moment that stuck with me, which was like, dude, why are you like quit putting expectations on things. And I do the same thing. So I cook for my family, right?
Well,
And
that's
I'm a good
Chad's,
cook.
like, what's the AA? Have expectations, but let go of the results.
Yeah,
Or
it's
whatever.
wear life like a loose garment. But you know, and I do the same thing because like I cook, and so I spend all this time to cook this amazing meal, right? And then I time it out to where everything's going to be just, you know, everything's done at the perfect time, and I've got it on the table, it's there, and I've told them we're going to be eating at 5. And I was corralling like 5 kids at one point, and then somebody'd be off in their room, and I told them you need to be down here in 10 minutes, and they're not there, and they've got some distraction, and it's like it's 5:20, and they're still not sitting down to eat. It's like driving me crazy. And but here's the insanity of that: I'm trying to love my family by creating this, because I'm loving through creating this amazing meal. Right? There's a lot of love in that, and then I end up getting pissy, and I'm angry. And then all of a sudden, I make some snarky comment like, "You guys can't even show up at 5:20." So I ruined the dang thing before it even gets started.
Exactly. That's the same. It's exactly the same trope that everybody talks about of like getting ready for church. When you're getting ready for church, trying to get there on time, and you're just like, "Come on, all you little bastard, let's go worship God."
Yeah.
You know,
And you're thinking, one of the things is I've actually just had occasion to kind of look back at what Jess and I, as we were thinking through kind of estuary, and we kind of we saw something, and we took a lot of Von Donk's and PBK's conversations, and then we're taking to look, and we created kind of this little one pager that kind of talked about what the vision of what this is, you know. And firstly, like, we realized that we had to tell the church people, this is not church, and quit trying to come in and convert everyone, because it's the Christians that want to come in and try and convert people when you're having conversations. But when you talk about we do need dialogos, right? We do need discussion of opposite sides and its opponent processing. So that's valuable, just allowing someone to come on and spew something without ever having the conversation. And there was one thing that came out. So we talked about who would enjoy estuary, right? And it was someone who was open to having good faith conversations, someone who has mutual respect, openness, the ability to listen, right? The willingness to try and understand where, someone else's viewpoint, right? But then we talked about who wouldn't be a good fit for estuary. And it's ideologues, right?
yeah,
That can't have their mind changed, or the grace to let people have the opinions of their own. And then we ran across this thing, and Jess pointed me to it. It's called a beef only thinker. So the people that don't fit well in estuary, or even on these just chattings or whatever, a beef only thinker is someone you cannot simply talk to. Anything that is not an expression of pure unqualified support for whatever they are doing or saying is received as a mark of disrespect and a provocation of conflict. From there, you can only crash into honor-based conflict mode or back away and disengage. So if you have one of those people that shows up, you need to allow them to stay for a while, because, hey, maybe they can see that this isn't working out well for them, and they want to, they come away and go, wow, I need to change this mode. But if they keep coming and they can't have a good faith conversation, at some point, for the sake of the group, who don't want to waste a whole hour having someone just come in here and just not be willing to have a conversation, at some point you got to say, hey, dude, or ma'am, we tried. Maybe this isn't the place for you, because this is the place where, and I think this is really good. And I grabbed this. It's about understanding, right? I think people come there to try to understand some things about themselves. I think the right kind of people. And then the other thing is, you have to be willing to try and understand someone else. So I would put this out, and this is one of the things with Sam, and I don't want to get into it, but it was Trinity, that sort of thing. I really sought to understand, because I wanted to understand how he processed that, right? So then I was paying attention, I was listening, we were talking, and then I saw these divergent points where he sees things going this way and I see things going a different way. And I could guess and interpret, I bet you would say this about this, and he'd say, yeah, exactly. And I was like, and now I understand him. Yeah. Right? I don't agree with him, because I take a different fork in the road.
Right.
But now I understand Sam. By the way, I use the word persuaded. One of the things that I've realized in that sort of a conflict is Sam is persuaded heavily and leans this way. I am persuaded and heavily and lean this way. But I have to leave open the room for you know, hey, am I 100% certain on this? Well, I got to leave a little wiggle room in there.
Oh yeah, you always have to. But that reminds me of, was this another Jordan Hall, like, brilliant? I'm thinking it's him, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe I heard it somewhere else. But I think the Greek for to persuade in the New Testament means to, like, convince oneself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something. I think that's true,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just so. Of course, that's integrity. That's what it
Yep.
is to be persuaded. Is you are aligning yourself with, but it's an internal agreement, which is so. So the last thing, I don't even know that I mentioned this thing that I put in the description, is I made this morning because someone had asked for it under yesterday's live stream. Shari's reading, which was really good. I don't know if you saw the live stream or whatever.
I was in on that portion.
You were in it. Okay. I can't remember because I dropped out, but oh yeah, you were there because I said also, yeah, all my loving departures. But that was really, really good, and it's full of that stuff. It really reminds you of that Viktor Frankl quote that Michael used to share all the time. But you can't understand someone if you don't love them. You can't. You really can't. Which is key to my personalist knowing. Loving is understanding. Or Esther Meek, that's her book, right? Isn't it? Loving to Know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I think that's her book. So most people just think like you, but the objective mind is just like the intellect. It's just like it's discursive reasoning isn't necessarily loving at all, and so loving to know can include that, but then the reasoning has to be nested inside that love. The love has to be primary.
And AA does, or the 12-step groups do a good job of pulling that together, because what you understand is you have a spiritual malady, right? And that it appears that what you're dealing only can be answered and be cured by God, right? But then the other side, there's this thing called to thine own self be true, right?
Mm.
And and then that also feeds into the God of your own understanding, which is all you could ever have anyway, right? But so
Yeah.
you have these corresponding things where it doesn't put you into this, I would call selfish, self-focused, self-love sort of thing. Like it's not
Yeah.
that thing which you can get that's kind of permeating society or whatever. So it's
Yeah.
understanding that you need this power greater than yourself outside of yourselves. And the frame is a loving God. That's it. Like what I love is like the only frame that's set up is it's a loving God, right?
Yeah.
And then the other frame, which I shared yesterday, which Chad talked about, the keystone is the
Yeah.
keystone of all of it is that he is the father and you are the child. He is the father and we are his children. So you start to see yourself in that, like, man, I'm not a piece of dung, right? No, I'm a child of God. I bear the image. I'm worth, because so many people come in and there's two different types. There's the people who are so low and they're in so much shame and they hate themselves so much. They need some encouragement. They need to know that they're not that, right? They've gotta have some of that. And then other people are too puffed up and quite frankly need to get their egos obliterated to kind of get humility. So, but all that's like either or. The Chinese, like the maybe, like everything is in tension, and that's kind of also tying it into at the personal level. Everything is in tension and paradox. And then you're talking about how do we disagree well? Well, there has to be tension. It's not just letting someone come in and spew whatever they want and trounce all over people and be rude and be obnoxious and be a beef only thinker. And at the same time, you need to allow people that even don't do it well to learn how to have those sorts of conversations. Right? That's part of allowing someone into it and putting up with it for a period of time, because sometimes we all just need the opportunity we need the opportunity to learn how to do these things. And how do you do it if you don't invite someone in for a period of time and see if they can't start to learn how to play well with others?
Right. Well, and that's kind of a that's kind of my question of when, the discernment of when to excommunicate, when to anathematize someone from any particular body, right? So like even in here, because that's what you were just saying, to when is that point that someone is so repeatedly doing the beef only interacting that you decide for them to leave, because this happened all the time back when the bridges of meaning Discord was hopping so much more. I would argue, and I have particular people that I can think of. Like, I wish this dude was still around. What was his name? Was his name Zale? Was it Zale? Something like that. But he was kind of a big reformed guy. He's the one who showed me this one. He showed me this great video that I have in a playlist on my channel, which was really helpful for me talking through kind of like monism, dualism, and like this healthy Trinitarianism. And I would take it in all these directions that he didn't want me to go with. And he's like, no. But he was one of those. He wasn't a beef only thinker, but he was he came across to me as like an ideologue. And this is where I think of that verse, like, they went out from us because they were not of us. Mm-hmm. Very often ideologues on the BOM or in these live streams or whatever, they won't hang around because they will get repeatedly frustrated that everyone isn't coming to their camp. The zero-sum game they're trying to win, the conversionist game, to like everybody come to team the exclusivist religion of the right side of history, which is my team, the right team. When people won't just come to their side and they just keep doing this thing, they're just like, what is this stupid thing? I'm out of here. And they just leave. So very often they leave, but when do you kick them?
Well, and I think that happens really naturally. We've seen it. Certain people that have a certain ethos about them, over time, they realize that the collective group is acting in a certain way. And effectively, the exile just happens organically. Because people just don't want, and so they realize that. One of the things, and I'm glad he just showed up, Gavin. So Gavin was not a beef only thinker, right? But Gavin got kicked off the Bridges of Meaning Discourse. Okay, and at the time, I didn't agree with it at all, but it wasn't my circus to make those decisions, right? But when you hear Gavin tell his story, he had been doing some things and trying to direct. He kind of had a way that he felt like things could be run better. And so at the end, he gets exiled. He gets kicked out of the BOM Discord. Now, there were other places for him to stay in connection. Fast forward a year and a half or 2 years. I don't know how long this has taken. And Gavin has transformed radically as a human being and is now taking his, you know what I mean? So there was this sense I thought that the exile of Gavin was unwarranted, and this is the Chinese farmer maybe. Like, I thought it was a bad thing in the moment. I'm like, God, we can't get rid of Gavin. But then in the end, that thing, even though I didn't disagree with it, probably played some sort of a role in Gavin.
His election was for future inclusion of a higher up and higher end for everyone.
Right. And so I don't know, like, I think there's always the answers in between, but I bet some aspect of that, if Gavin would talk about it, I bet some aspect of that played some role in this transformation that he's undergone. Like, for me, and I would look at this, like, when I think about certain stories of transformation, I think of Manuel. I think how he showed up and how he's talked about how this little corner transformed him. And I think you can see so many aspects of that. I think about someone like Gavin, his story is such a powerful story here.
It is. Yeah.
Philip Nickerson, who hangs around in these comments, came in here or whatever. And, now he's, going to church and some other, like, there's all these amazing stories. But yeah, I don't know. I think, to me, I think those things become where, like, PVK has done a good job because he's had a church, and he's very reticent to tell someone they can't hang around, but he will do it eventually, like, because he has other people. Oh, there's Gavin. Awesome.
Look at this beautiful man.
He will do it eventually. So PVK is our model. Yeah. Right. But I look at, again, I think, I think Gavin, I think, is one of the all-stars of this little corner. And it's because the story he has to tell is so powerful. It's his story that's.
Let's keep talking about how great Gavin is until he becomes uncomfortable.
I only came in because y'all think I'm great.
Yeah, right.
If y'all had been hating on me, I would have stayed away.
No, but I think that's true. Wouldn't you say that that's kind of what happened with you, Gavin, is you really wanted more of a leadership role because you had a lot of ideas, you had a lot of plans, you thought how you could really help things, and Joey didn't really want to give you that role, and then excommunicated you. But now I would say, like, I think you are fundamentally leading in the way that you speak and the way that you do. You are having a very servant leadership. Like, I just see Christ all over you in the way you're leading, or arguing for the sake of heaven, Hezi, or whatever. Zitzun,
Hello all. I hope you're all doing
buddy.
well.
Hey, Hezi. I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad you're here too, Gavin. And your recent stream with your wife, I think, was amazing. It's so beautiful to see both of you together, and it seems just like a very loving and honest relationship, and the interaction between you is beautiful. So thank you for sharing that, and thank your wife as well. I'm sure that was difficult and uncomfortable. So much praise.
If it went bad, we would have just deleted it.
I guess so. That's true. I don't know. You might have been like, "No, we committed. This is happening."
Selection bias.
I just to focus for a moment on what Luke was talking about with regards to, you were saying that this how to argue, how to have these arguments and these disagreements and these discussions in the TLC, and an argument for heaven's sake. Ultimately, it boils down to the manner in which the disagreement is being had, right? And that's you're always going to have a problem with how it's being typed and how you're reading the comment, right? Like a lot is being lost in translation over there, right?
Yeah.
Like Anselm can be having a smile on his face and be like he's writing it as a zinger and you're taking it as like a stab, right? So we always have to be careful how we read those stuff, and it's on us, or as people who participate, we have to take that into consideration, and the people writing that also have to take that into consideration. How the things are going to be perceived as well, and if they want to clarify, they should of course join. Now, I would also say that I had a discussion yesterday after my stream that went on for a while with a person named Schleif in Jacob's server, and following that conversation, Yosef commented on the Discord. He had some comments. He had some critiques of how the discussion was going. Now, I take no offense to that, because I know that Yosef is just trying to ultimately identify truth, right? Or at the very least, the relevant truth for the context of the conversation we're having. And now I'm puzzled by this, because I thought I was clarifying myself, but I guess I didn't clarify myself. So I asked him to please clarify and explain. But because there's no ego there, I just want to know what's right. So I don't feel tension when Anselman's calling me out, because I don't think he's saying, "You're an idiot, shut up, don't be here." I think he's saying, "You're missing the mark, you're getting it wrong." And a part of that tension is you have to have the patience to keep on hearing someone calling you out. And on the flip side, I would hope that Anselman doesn't give up on me. Well, in this case, not giving up on me means one day I become Christian. So like, you could give up, Anselman. Having said that, it's nice to see that one wouldn't want to stop potentially, right? He doesn't want to stop engaging, and he wants to hear me out because he wants to famously the Hillelian school of thought, in their study halls, they would first steelman the Shamayan school of thought, their position, right? So to really make sure they understand that position. And I think, to be fair, many times, Luke, if you read a comment, you'll extrapolate and articulate where your position was with regard to that comment. And that is amazing. And that is how that conversation needs to be done. And I would say towards an Anselman, that it's almost as good as it gets. And at that point, Anselman, as long as Luke will continue to engage in good faith, you could continue to challenge him in good faith. Clarify, write again. If he's saying that he misunderstood you, then maybe you write a longer post. Maybe you jump on. You could continue with one-liners, and Anselman is just an example over here, right? It could be anyone else that's commenting. But I think we should be, as long as people are still engaging in seemingly in good faith, then I think you're right with regards to the boundaries. Even the people that are disagreeable, or even the people that are less open to this thought process, as long as they're trying to participate in that fair way, in that good faith, then those are the bounds.
Well, I think one important thing to think about, like, so this is the thing that I need to remember for someone like Anselman, and I can guess where he's at. Like, so if you want to find what could be the ultimate best, most pure reason why he would want you to become Christian, Hezi, because at his core, he believes if you don't do that, you're off to eternal damnation or something like that, right? So his love, and I think a lot of people that would go out and knock on doors and do the things that they do, or eat with their family members, right, who aren't believers, is deep down they believe they're trying to save them from ultimate ruin. And so that's an act of love. It really is. Now, it can get skewed in certain areas, but if you want to prescribe the best heart towards someone who's doing that, that's why they're doing it.
I would just, and anyone else could jump in, I would just ask, right? And this, I think, is part of the tension that Luke has, or Anselman has with Luke. Seemingly, hey, Luke, you're being all kumbaya, lovey-dovey, right? And at some point, don't you need to call out Hezi, or don't you have to say, like, well, what I think the truth is X? And
But here's the thing with Anselman, right? I do that. You and I have had those conversations. You know where we disagree. I've said those things. I don't have to beat you over the head with it. I mean, what's the point of that?
So, first of all, yes, I would just say, and maybe this is less done in Christian circles, but I have a certain methodology, right? Now, within my diverse toolkit or arsenal of Jewish law, halakha, midrash, I could use those elements to adjust my goggles, so to speak, or my oculus, so to speak, in that conversation, which is I generally think X, right? Or we'll talk about reincarnation or of the soul, right? So there's there's how I generally feel about that, and I want to, let's say, lean more materialistic. However, I don't deny that, and I know there's schools of thought that I could dip into if I wanted to play around with that conversation. So when someone I meet right now that's saying, like, this is the only thing I believe in, I still have room to engage with them because I still have that wiggle room, so to speak. Now, yeah. I speak to an Anselman, and he comes and says, like, at some point we're going to hit an impasse, right? Where, like, this is not good, and if you don't find salvation by Christ, your soul is damned. I mean, but then I also have to think about the Pope or the Vatican coming out saying that Jews no longer necessarily require salvation through Christ, right? They could find that through the Torah. And there's talking about different levels of, like, they're the older brother. And I could be speaking on Grail Country to Nate, and there's a conversation where he's like, well, I think when you use that terminology, really, I think we agree, right? So it depends how you want to go about it. And then I would ask Anselman, do you feel that you could be flexible within your own tradition, or...
Hezi, you cutting out.
He was on a roll.
He was. He'll figure it out. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, what Hezi is saying is essentially, I think, Lance, what you said. You can't have that absolute certainty that you're right, or else you can't even engage in the conversation. You can't harvest the fringe of your own confidence in whatever you think, or else that collapses into an absolute totalizing certainty that makes it pointless you can't even truly engage except in a conversionist way with someone else, which means you can't be open to the truth outside the truth you currently apprehend, because you're in that exclusivist religion of the right side of history, and then there's no point in talking except to dominate people. That's what the ideologue does.
See, I've been very blessed in being in a 12-step community that I was raised in the apologetic conversionist Christian milieu, right? And so I was this guy that actually thought about certain people and felt like I needed to persuade them to change their minds or they were down going into eternal damnation stuff. So I lived that. But what I've been blessed with is in 12-step communities is I've seen people embark on a path of spiritual practices and moving into actual steps or whatever. And then I've seen these radical spiritual awakenings happen, right? That have happened outside the quote unquote although it's Christian principles, outside of a biblical Christian frame, right? Like they didn't have to go down, and I'm not trying to say this, but I mean it's like they didn't have to go down the Romans road to meet God.
Yeah.
And then a lot of those people end up in church. Like I'm just, whatever, the church of their choosing. But some people just stay praying to God and doing all the spiritual practices and living it, and they go on to live. I mean, you see God shining forth all over them. So I was very blessed to have a real experience where I've seen human beings, right, go with a God of their own understanding. And so that gives, so it cured me of my conflict-based mode around, for example, to be able to be hanging out with Hezi, like 22-year-old Lance probably would have been a lot more like redeemed Zoomer
Yeah.
than 50-year-old Lance, right? Who seriously wants to understand Hezi. Like I love Zevi Slavin, love his channel, like what his project is and everything else. I've just been opened up to so many things because here it comes back to you, Luke. It's the personalist knowing, both for myself and seeing it live out in the lives of others, that I realize I can back off and just trust God to do what God does.
You Calvinist, Lance. What a Calvinist. I'm just kidding. Hezi.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got a phone call.
Okay.
My point was that there's modern Orthodox. There are ultra Orthodox, religious Zionists. All of them are welcome in my synagogue, and I consider all of them part of my quorum. And I don't know if you have that amount of flexibility in Christianity, where and my point would be to Anselman, if you could do that, right? Like it could be that in your conversation here with Hezi, this is where you apply your Protestant hat or your Lutheran hat, but could be that that's not possible. You don't have that flexibility to play around within your. And I would say the extreme of that would be, and what becomes interesting to me is, okay, a Sam, right? I see, because Sam is a Unitarian, quote unquote, more in my comfort zone. That makes it very problematic for him, though, right? In local churches and and then is Sam still considered Christian? Is Sam considered Christian as far as Anselman's concerned, right? Or is his soul also damned, so to speak? And then the question would be, as far as for heaven's sake, Anselman engages Sam in a good faith conversation, and then either Sam gets convinced, as long as it's being done in good faith and in proper manner, and that's why humor is important and patience is important, but either Anselman understands where he's coming from, and then he could either not necessarily accept his truth, but understand his truth, where he could still feel that he could be saved, or Sam realizes the error of his ways, but ultimately, at the end of that discussion, either one realizes there's a truth that was out of his grasp, now he realizes that and he accepts that truth, and then it was both for heaven's sake, or realizing that to have shalom, to have peace, that doesn't mean we all have to have one truth. There's the ultimate truth that God has, and then there's truths, there are tensions there, and we speak about this a lot, about diversity and unity. There could be diverse thoughts that can still be held together.
Totally. And so I want to say something to that. Oh, we're going to get some PVK. So there's a lot of great comments. I was trying to highlight them. What Bob says here is great, but I want to say this, what you're talking about, I think this is possible. And honestly, this is of my thought, that I think this thing is completely, I don't know, unique to me. I've never heard anybody else say this, but this is what I mean by the iconic thinking aspect of my line of thinking. With iconic thinking, you would essentially hold to your constructions, your models, your maps, maybe even your ideologies as icons. And I would argue that if we really understand what an icon is, and you treat your map, your left brain understanding of the territory as an icon, if you truly do, then that keeps you from harvesting the fringes and becoming tribal. It actually stops you from being an ideologue. Because you don't center your entire identity in the map of your understanding. But that's what an icon is. It's an existent thing. It's a description. It is there, but it's not just that. It's also open to further revelation, because it's all veiling and unveiling. That's what everything is. But I don't know that people, we're so captured by, I would argue, this principality, this demon of ideological thinking, which I call the exclusivist religion of the right side of history, that we can't even engage in these conversations without it feeling like a death to us, because we have so much egoic attachment to our map.
Right. So, I mean, so what one would have to believe, or at least I believe, and you and I spoke about this a little, Luke, about the quote of Rabbi Cook, right? About how no one's going to stop me seeking. Only God ultimately is going to stop me seeking. And even if that means I need to, sort of skip above the
phone calls. He's a busy man. Gavin, now's your time, unless you just want to hang. You don't.
But we definitely want to get to the Gavin story at some point. Like, you're hanging in there. Don't worry, Gavin. We're not. I want to tie that thread because I think it's important. I wanted to add one thing here. I wanted to add one thing about Anselman. About a year and a half ago, Anselman was going after you, I think, pretty nastily in comments, and I came back and responded like I just was like, hey, why don't you show your face and show up here or whatever? It was snarky and mean, and I want to repent of that, because here's one of the things I've done. So I go over and watch the Living Stones live stream quite a bit. And there's a chat that shows up there, and Anselman is always in there. And when he's in that mode of being there for that place, the kindness and the love and the blessing that he shares, like I've seen that aspect of him. So to some extent, Anselman is such a prolific commenter that it's okay for us to comment to some extent when he won't come on here. But at the same time, I almost feel like, I feel bad like talking about Anselman if he can't come on here and have the conversation for himself in some way. So I just wanted, I don't know why that spirit was on me about that. Like, I think we're having a good conversation, but Anselman, if you're listening, I love that you're here. I would love to have you join one of these streams someday. We would literally, you're as a prolific a commenter has been in the TLC for 5 years now. So we'd love to see you.
On that point, Lance, I'll just piggyback on. So Anselman and I got into it in some comments about what I was calling like prima scriptura. Sounds similar to sola scriptura. And then I was thinking, like, this guy doesn't like me. And then next thing I know, he's like in my comments on my channel being nice. So it's like, he's a fun character. I'm glad he's here.
It's a roller coaster ride. Paul.
People are complex. They really are. And there's a lot of different ways to go through these issues. A lot of them, like for me, there are a lot of Christian resources. Now, when I say that, a lot of people aren't going to understand. But to me, again, sorry, Luke, I'm going to promote my Calvinism. It's the sovereignty of God. We all will stand before God. And as a Calvinist, I have to say that it's not a system, it's God. And God, I stand before God, Hezi stands before God, someone from Islam stands before God, and we all give an account. And now, of course, I have certain beliefs in my system. And so we continue to work through these things together. But it's helpful. It's also helpful for me to understand that try not to be tyrannical about many of the tyrannicals. People have their binaries, and binaries always develop. And I pointed out to Luke sometimes his binaries, although Luke's pretty flexible. So he once he sort of pronounces a binary, he'll usually kind of find a way to
the non-duality that includes duality.
There you go. That's Luke. So, and
that's
again,
McGilchrist.
I think one of the things that I have valued about so many of these spaces is sometimes you can have a space that just gets down into a least common denominator spirituality that eventually means nothing. And we don't see that here, because I think people that gets dull pretty quickly, because then suddenly nothing means anything or everything means nothing. And so it's this dance to try to continue to explore and pursue. And, you know, on one hand, diversity is this thing that's been just driving civilizations nuts for very good reason, pluralism. But at the same time, we have to figure out how to live with it and deal with it. And I think actually, you know, this is where some of the Orthodox are going to sort of chafe. And I don't find really Luke in that space, which I find Luke to be very interesting. But part of what sort of pluralistic democracy has given us is a space to talk about these things. Now, it's not a complete answer, but it's a whole lot better to be friends with my Jewish and Muslim friends and to be able to talk about our differences than to, you know, play all kinds of nasty games about taking away their property or taking away their lives or having our property taken away or having our lives taken away. So, you know, I do think we learned some things in the Enlightenment. I do think we learned some things in the Protestant Reformation. I do think we've learned some things with liberal democracy. I think we're seeing some of the weaknesses of it. And so we carry on moving forward, trying to do the best we can. So it's, yeah. And that's why I really value these conversations and all the other partners in them. But it's really hard. And I too have to praise Anselman for whatever reason. He's not joined the live streams, but he, you know, I think you said it well earlier that people sort of self-select. They'll hit a wall and they'll leave, and that's okay. And every now and then you do have to show someone the door and keep them out a little bit. That's okay. But, you know, Anselman has stuck with this. And, you know, Anselman is regularly on Grail Country. And if you know anything about Anselman, you know, Grail Country is tough for him. And, you know, and T-Grog has been sticking with this and T-Grog showing up. And for me, these are the kinds of things that say we're doing the right thing. We're not excluding the exclusivists. We're not just sort of least common denominating everything. We're working in here and we're having these conversations. And I know Jacob gets a little chafed sometimes and people have egos involved, but, you know, I think, Lance, what you said about Gavin's path, I think it's true. I mean, Gavin could have just given BOM the finger and walked away from this little corner, but what he did was hang in there, and now, you know, he's one of the leaders here. So this is the way it works.
Yes, Heresy.
Shari, first of all, it's lovely to have you over here. Good morning.
Good morning.
There's a midrash in our tradition that talks about the splitting of the Sea of Reeds, and instead of it just as, you know, Hollywood portrays it, splitting just right in the middle and all the Israelites walking through it, there's a midrash that each tribe had its own path to go through, and the midrash, it says that each tribe didn't see the feet of the other tribe. They didn't know where they were walking. They weren't sure exactly the path they were taking. However, if you could imagine, there was like windows through the walls of water where they could see them still making their way. And in a certain sense, I would hope that in the TLC, it seems that whether it's Gavin or Luke or Pastor Paul, Shari, and even the Jews over here, it seems to me that we're all walking towards the same direction. And I can't see your feet, and I don't exactly know what exact path you're taking, but I know that it's towards Allah or towards the Father or towards God. And are there differences over there? The answer is yes. But if there's a space, definitely after 2,000 years, after so much fighting, to be at a place where you could have a conversation like this, I want to believe that this is a win as far as God's concerned. And what could also be expected from humans who are complicated, who come from different backgrounds. So to have so much, to have so much in common, to then focus on the differences, I think there'll be time for that. But
Yeah,
for right now, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
One of the things you said, just to do that, I loved it. You said TLC is a win because God's children are playing together. Like, I love the way you frame that, and that's so true, right? Like we're coming together, and I do think the Father is looking down on us with a smile.
Shari,
Yeah.
hi.
Hi. I'm just listening. Just keep going.
Okay. All right. Did you
good.
see? I made a Paul. If you haven't seen this, you should. I put it on my channel because that's all I can do. But I clipped because someone asked for it on Grail Country, just your reading yesterday.
Oh,
So I just made a video of it that's on my channel because that's excellent. And then I was looking this morning. I want to buy that book because I just want to own it. I don't. It's just.
well,
it's like,
there's this book, which is the one we went through.
Yeah.
But now there's a new full manuscript. And I would recommend the full manuscript.
The unabridged, yeah.
Because
Where
that's
did
what's
you
on
get the full
Audible.
manuscript,
And
Shari?
what's that?
How did you get the full manuscript?
Well, I downloaded it on Audible, and I was listening to the thing, and then I grabbed this book, and I was looking for the quote, and it wasn't in here, and I was like, what the heck? And then I found out that this is the abridged version.
Yeah.
So, and Douglas Harding abridged it himself. So he took 600 pages and turned it into this. So
Wow.
there's way more in the other one. And so it's all available on Amazon if anybody wants. There's the actual, like, the book. You can get the book, you can get the Kindle version and the Audible of the bigger thing. And it's, while we're talking about it, I'll just throw this in. I wanted to read this. In the bigger version, there's a preface by a guy, Richard Lang, who really promotes Douglas Harding's stuff. He's a Buddhist, so this is interesting.
That's it.
But anyway, he has an excerpt from a letter that C.S. Lewis wrote to Douglas Harding in there, and it says, and this is a quote from C.S. Lewis. Hang it all, you've made me drunk, roaring drunk as I haven't been on a book. I mean, a book of doctrine. Imaginative works are another matter. Since I first read Bergson during World War I, who or what are you? How have I lived 40 years without my having heard of you before? My sensation is that you have written a book of the highest genius.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. That reminds me of like the first, because I was looking it up just for the book, and there was an Amazon thing, and there were all these reviews of the unabridged, I think. And the first review, which gives it 5 stars or something, it's really long. I didn't read it all, but it essentially, there's like an edit to it. And the first thing it's saying is like, I really did not like this book, and I didn't like that, blah, 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 blah. And then the edit is like, actually, I kind of like this book, but nothing has challenged me so much. And it's just like, there are certain, like, I've said this before, and I'll just say it because I'm not going to have false humility. I think one of my gifts is seeing quality. Like, I think I just have a metal detector for gold, and I don't always go into it, but I sense where it is.
Yeah.
And this book is one of those things. There are just certain things, like when I read Lilith, or like George MacDonald, I didn't understand most of Lilith, I'm sure, but like it in a kind of Terrence Malick Heideggerian way, it just changed my perception of the world. It just did. Like, it transformed me. Little Big is like that. There are just certain works that it's not even like giving you new ideas. Malick explicitly in his film says, like, my films aren't about ideas. I'm not trying to give you ideas. I'm not trying to communicate ideas. Like the whole Barbie conversation I've had with Sam and Tripp drives me nuts. And people are like, what's the point? That's not what Malick is ever trying to do in his movies. If you come to a Malick film and you're like, what's the point? Not that.
Yeah. Well, I just have to say, people, that it was Paul Vanderklay that brought this book to our attention back in the day.
Hey, Paul.
It's a Lewis thing.
Paul
right?
Vanderklay featured this on his, I don't remember exactly what you talked about, Paul, but you talked about it. Somebody had recommended it to you because C.S. Lewis wrote the introduction to this book. And then Nate and I went through it. And honestly, at the time, we were both kind of going, oh my God, what the heck is this guy talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
But man, this is the beautiful thing about time, for one thing, and then revisiting past, ideas or books or whatever, movies even, is you like you say all the time, Luke, that quote isn't, I think it's from George MacDonald, right? It all depends on what you see depends on where you're standing, or something like that.
That's actually Lewis, but I think he probably got it from George MacDonald. I mean, that's Lewis and the Magician's Nephew. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, and so I just had, I was doing the, okay, let's finish this thing, the conscientious part of me.
Mm-hmm.
So I queued it up in my Audible and hit the road and pressed play. And I was just like, what? And pulling over. And then I was, looking for the quotes in my Kindle and I couldn't find them. And I was like, what's going on here? So
Shari, that's the Kairos moment you needed, because a book like that, like even if I got it, I would need a 10-hour road trip to be able to focus the attention, because the books like that are hard.
Yeah.
Like it's not an easy read. Like this is what I tell people with Lilith and stuff. Yeah, it's a fairy story. It's not an easy read. Like there's so much in there. It'll blow your mind. What is this? Gateway
to the Great Books.
Yeah, I went to the library for the first time. So this is a book that would bore everybody and is hard to read.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one that's relevant for this corner would be The Hiding Place, which Chad recommended, which Paul recommended to Chad, which actually without this book, I might not be a Christian. Right. It was
so good.
It was a good one. But yeah, if you want to talk about mathematics or the coupling and cohesion of software and things, like,
just put me right to sleep, Gavin. Just put me right to sleep with that one.
Yeah. Well, that whole topic about what we are skilled in and have like just a large level of knowledge is compared with that which brings us together. That's to me, that kind of stuff is interesting. So, because that whenever Luke talks about being sad, it's I feel like it probably has something to do with there's someone who comes in with a specialized knowledge and specialized experience who's trying to share something they think is valuable, but then it doesn't just fit well with everyone else's experience and specialized knowledge.
It's not well, and I don't know how much I want to go into this. It's not just that. It's like whatever, his comments out there on our last live stream. It's the same thing that happened to me in my worst church experience, when it's not merely about disagreeing. Like you can disagree with someone without assaulting their character. It is possible to do that. But
I remember your story. Yeah, you heard a story where
like Anselman in his comment calls me dishonest. Like that's not nice. It's not a nice thing to say. I don't call him dishonest. I disagree with him.
Was your pride hurt, Luke?
Huh?
Was your pride hurt?
But when you say that you are like the duality of non-duality or something like that, and these coincidences of opposites, it's like that can appear dishonest. Like you kind of have to own the paradox that you are saying paradoxical things and that are contradictory. And that seems like, according to some people's definitions, that would seem dishonest if you're the kind of person who can't handle paradoxes and coincidences of opposites and things like that.
Right. But Hezi has illustrated this well. Like he's explicitly modeled how to do this, how to disagree for the sake of heaven. It's one thing to say you are dishonest. It's another thing to say like what you're saying seems dishonest. And it like this is that Tim Keller thing, how to disagree. There are different ways to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not going to win a negotiation if you come in and start calling people dishonest.
Right. That's I mean, he called you that. That's on him.
Yep,
Right.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Paul. That reflects him more than it reflects Luke. And he exposes himself, like I shouldn't the right word, but that shows where he's at in his journey. And so that's for him to say and do those things publicly. And that's for him to reconcile, not for you. I mean, you have your own integrity. Like I have this really good gift that's been given to me. Like in some ways, like when people say things and I know they're fundamentally not true about me, I do not let that bother me because I don't have to own that.
Oh,
like, that's
What?
Oh, Paul, how can you stand it? So much love.
The book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss is really good if you want to learn how to say things like it seems like you're dishonest.
Right,
Instead of
right.
you're
And
dishonest.
so there's a lot of questions in here.
Well,
This is
wait, guys, can we just leave Anselman alone for now? Like, honestly,
Yeah.
like,
I wasn't pointing at
No.
Anselman. I was pointing at this.
I don't. Yeah, I know. I understand. But the thing is, you know, he left a comment and something like, okay, you know, I'll hang around, but I won't say anything, you know. And it's like, oh, good, now we've defanged and declawed Anselman.
Yeah, and that's not what I
Right?
want at all.
And
Right.
no, that is not what we want. And I told him that. I said, listen, I don't want a declawed version of you, okay? Like, I really don't. I don't always agree with you, but I know that he comes from a place of love. And you know, when like the quote that I read yesterday, right? We have to enter into that center to really understand what it is that motivates Anselman, and it's love that motivates him.
Agreed.
So
Yep.
that's good enough. That is good enough for me.
But that's also what
You know,
motivates
if he
Tigran.
chooses the wrong, if he happens to choose the wrong word, Luke. Grace. You know, if he chooses the wrong word.
Can we point out specific things and specific people rather than speaking in generics and still have grace?
I don't think so. I don't
Okay.
think you can.
No, because that's actually not honest either. Like,
but you got to do
when
you can't rebuke publicly though. Like, you need to go rebuke brother to brother, and then if that doesn't work, rebuke with 2 or 3, and if that doesn't work, then you go to the town square. Right?
Man, Gavin's learning fast, Paul.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's Matthew 18.
Yeah, because Gavin's also loving. Like, this is the thing.
Right.
You can't know these things if you don't love. It's just that simple. It's really not hard.
Well, and I was thinking, Gavin, you were talking about different strengths or whatever. We were spending some time in Ephesians 4 yesterday, and I'm brought right back to it again today. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves, and blown here and there by every wind of teaching, by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. From him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. Anselman has his part to play. Gavin, like, you have that, you know, you talk about you're very analytical and you've got skills in that area. Like, you bring that. Shari is probably like the opposite of that and in some ways, and yet you two come together. Like, we all play our part in our role, you know, beautifully in his body.
Yes, and even being hurt. This is my whole everything's a gift if you receive it as a gift. It's like what I was talking about my dinner table. It's like what I was sad by the interactions. I was sad by it. I was hurt by it. That's a gift to me. How do I respond to that? But then what am I trying to use this space for, Phlebas? Discipleship. How to model proper being in the world. I try to model it with integrity, but I can't do that without talking about things in this space. How would I do it?
Yeah, but I think you have to be careful about that even.
It's
like, seriously.
Two things. One is people will often, if someone calls me dishonest, I have to, I mean, and this is where, again, I'll promote my Calvinism. I'll be a dogmatist. People complain that I'm never enough of that. I am dishonest. I am dishonest. I am a liar. I am all of these things. I mean, I really am. And, you know, because if I examine myself, I mean, sorry, Luke, I didn't mean to kind of prick you with the pride question, but
no, that's good.
I said it because I knew you could handle it, and because we have that kind of relationship already, even though we haven't spent a lot of time in person together, which is quite remarkable to me because I didn't know what this kind of media can afford in terms of relationship. But the second thing is, people have to appreciate the role that dogmatists play. If the entire community, you know, it's not only do we have to deal with the Consciousness Congress, but we have that be between each other. And so we need dogmatists. We need Anselmen. And so I personally am deeply gratified that he has stuck with me, because I know a lot that didn't. Because on one hand, they hear me talking about Jordan Peterson and think, oh, here's a and even a Christian Reformed pastor who will speak the truth, yada, yada. And then I'll say something else and they'll be like, oh, no. And so
you are a coincidence of opposites, Paul. That's why a lot of us like
Yeah, we have to. There was a comment in there before, and people always say this, like, is this a non-exclusivist space that excludes exclusivists? Or is this a non-dogmatist place that excludes dogmatists? No, I hope not.
Well, I'll just say this, and in all love, and hopefully it gets, received that way. But there is a phenomenon of X whatevers, I remember being in a conversation, for example, with Tyler, and someone jumped on and attacked him, like really ad hominem, because he was a Mormon, and they were ex-Mormons. Okay.
Right.
And so their worst enemy was the Mormon, right? And they have inside information, and maybe they do see things that others don't see, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. And Tyler made the statement, oh, great, there's nothing worse than an ex-Mormon. But I mean, it's true for all of us, right?
Yeah.
Ex-whatevers are really
ex-drinkers, ex-smokers, or whatever. Amen.
They're just defensive, right? Like towards the ones the group they left, right? Because for whatever reason, betrayal, I don't know. It's hard to be loving to your enemies.
Sure is.
Right? It really, it's hard. And this is why I think it's so important to see the family, because like I've said this before, my worst enemy is my family. Okay. Like they really are like that. That's really where the rubber hits the road, and so I take that as a challenge from God, because he gave us the family.
Yeah.
To step into that and really learn what it means to love my enemies, because that's where I find my enemies, right there.
Yeah, amen. And if you all could be praying for me on spring break, I'm going to visit my parents who I mean, you guys all know me well enough. I grew up in conservative, very small town, Western South Dakota, to very traditional conservative people. Can you imagine them? This is like my dad. Who sired you, boy? Like my dad and I have a great relationship. Me and my mom can struggle sometimes because she just I just appear as for all the people that are frustrated in me, like those, like they're my mother. I mean,
exactly. And who has loved you the longest and the most and still does on this earth? It is your parents. And you know that without question. They come from a depth of love and knowing you at a level, despite the things that, you might do that. I mean, that's that sense, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's like Shari was saying, it's a love that looks like hate a lot of times.
That's right. That's what I was just going to say. Like that sometimes that's that dogmatism, right? That someone like the unnamed person that I don't want to name anymore in this live stream exhibits because they have a depth of knowledge that doesn't give them the, and an integrity actually, that doesn't allow them to not say it. Right. So, like sometimes my family members can turn to me and say something very cutting and hurting because it's true. And they cut right to the chase.
The truest things hurt the most.
Oh, it's so true.
Well, and then another thing is, which I think what you struggle with, Luke, and I struggle with this too right now, which is you also have to sometimes with some of those closest to you set up healthy boundaries, because you have an integrity and they don't truly know you. They think they do. And so they're acting out of ways. There are some times where you have to be true to yourself and you have to put up some healthy boundaries. If certain people who love you the most are quite frankly hurting you in ways that you know they don't understand. So it's always, again, it's everything. Like it's both and. Like they can say the truest things, and then sometimes I love A River Runs Through It. It's probably one of my top 2 movies of all time.
I love that.
And at the end, when he gives the sermon at the end, is he saw the character of oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name, that he played the youngest son. So he's talked about that he was beautiful, and then sometimes it's the ones we love the most that elude us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can still love them, that sort of stuff. And so it's everything's this stuff is all so complex, but it comes back to why Shari mentions it's the enemy. This comes out in 12, like it's those family dynamics that are the hardest ways to play things out. Like it is so much easier for me to love my enemy, have mercy, be graceful towards the people I don't live with.
Right. So I actually, I don't know if PVK is still here and he's listening. He's doing dog stuff. So PVK made a message on a live stream, and then we had a brief email interaction about it, because he was just talking, because something I will do on here, and I try to be careful about it, because I do talk about my family. I'll talk about my kids. I talk about my wife a lot. I brought up a tension, a disagreement with my wife in the sink. I don't bring up their names and things, but one of the reasons that I do that is because of everything that we're saying here. If this is a true place and a community that we're doing here, the realest shit is the family stuff. That's where like these truths are most intimate and most true. And I think you need to have wisdom and discernment and tact, and
that's why it's the longer that we interact with each other, the harder it's going to be together. Okay.
True. Absolutely.
It's true.
Well, absolutely. And Shari, like you and I, we've had our disagreements. We've had some struggles, here's the thing about all this like confessional doctrine, boundary policing thing. Shari, you and I see alike doctrinally, like pretty much identically, unlike almost everything. But that doesn't mean that we don't have relational tensions at times.
Oh no. Yeah. That's right.
So like, it's just love is so much more than just doctrinal purity, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, when I was I went on the weekend, I went to this divine liturgy, and there was a homily afterwards. And that's exactly what the priest talked about. He talked about, loving someone into being, and in the process, so he used the example of, there's a lot of babies in that liturgy, like little tiny babies, the kind that you can't shut up. When they start going, that's it. And there's no room. It was the tiniest little church, and it was packed. And, these moms would have to go into the bathroom basically, and you could still hear the baby crying. Right. And the priest said, this is, you can't get annoyed with this. And I thought, this is exactly why they let the kids stay in the liturgy.
Yeah.
Right?
It's all of it.
It's like, figure this out, people. Figure this out. This is not about you, right? This is about us. And so that was the homily, and it was great. I wasn't annoyed by the kids because I just love the sound of screaming babies.
No, that's part of it. It's fantastic. I agree with you. So like this comment, John Adamson, we are all searching. I might seem like a troll, but I really can't get my head around a loving God and Job or Noah. So I don't remember your name or you being trollish at all. And like this kind of comment is not trollish whatsoever. It's a
spectacular question. It's the deepest of all questions.
That's a fantastic comment.
I don't think anyone could get their head around Job.
Which if there is a point, maybe that's it. Yeah, it's That's fine. That's great. If that's where you really are, that's the Jordan Peterson. Speak the truth and let the cards fall where they may.
Sherry said,
If that's where you are in integrity,
Sherry
perfect.
said it's a something like it's about us, it's not about me. And to me, it seems like that matches up with John, and Job and Noah and God. It's like if it were about Job, that's not fair. If it were about all the people
Yeah.
that drowned in a flood, that's not
Amen.
fair. But
Amen.
so like, yeah, I wrestle with this too. I'm like, what about me? It's like I wrestle with this.
Yeah, it's a question we ask,
Yeah.
And
God's powerful, and kids get cancer. It's
well, whenever I say that, like, every day almost, I find myself in a position where I want to say, but what about me? Why do
hashtag
I
me
have
too.
to? And every time it comes out of my mouth or even just flits through my mind, God's like, I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
And that's the gold. That's one of the reasons I love Chad and his just incessant, like the whole AA thing is about self-centeredness. All of that. Self-pity, my sadness today. It's all like a woe is me story, which is selfishness. It's self-centeredness, which is what needs to die.
Yeah.
So it's all a grace. It's all a gift if it allows you to die to that.
Yeah.
Hey, I want John Adamson. If you're not familiar, there's a good friend of ours, Jess Providence's channel, and Shari joined him for an amazing walkthrough of the Book of Job. It's one of the greatest treatments personally, and I've spent time on this doing that. So I would encourage you to go check that out. Jess Providence's channel. Maybe we can share a link of that or whatever, where Jess and Shari walk through Job, because
I'll put it in the thing.
Yeah.
It's one of the absolute gold little corners of the corner. It's unbelievable.
So I didn't tell this part of my weekend. I gotta say this. I went to see Jonathan Peugeot. Not personally, but he did a conference at this small Antiochian church in Langley, BC. And it was, I've been thinking about it since I got back, and the highlight of my weekend, because the conference was on Saturday and I stayed for the Divine Liturgy on Sunday because I never get a chance to go to church. And, the conference was really great, but it was kind of like kindergarten symbolic world for Orthodox parishioners. And so I've deep dived into Jonathan's stuff for so long that, I was falling asleep a couple of times. I had to go for a long walk actually at one point. But it was great. It was really great. The Q&A was the most interesting to me, because then people are throwing up these questions. So it's always interesting to me what people are wondering about. And so, yeah. And there was one question, I mentioned this to Nate, actually. There was one question that I thought Jonathan hadn't. I knew he knew the answer, but I could tell that he had never actually articulated it before. And I don't know, Paul, you have more opportunity to talk to him than I ever will. But the lady asked, how do I know if I'm getting the right meaning? Right? Like if I'm not putting my meaning on a symbol or whatever, right? How do I know that I'm deriving the right meaning from something? And I saw him really struggling. I could see that he had a concept in his head, but he hadn't yet articulated it. And so, he kept saying, do you know what I mean? Are you getting a sense of what I'm saying? And he was like, talking like, a lot with his hands, because, and I'm just sitting there going, oh, I know the answer, because George MacDonald talks about this very thing in his Fantastic Imagination essay. And, but anyway,
On Grail Country, if you haven't seen it, Go check it out. They
Give us
walk
the
through
answer,
it.
Sherry. Give 2 minutes.
Well,
answer.
it's a little bit long and drawn out, but
Okay.
Anyway, I thought that was really good because that is an honest question. Like, how do I know I'm getting the right meaning out of something? And people worry about this, right? Because they don't want to go down the wrong path. They don't want to, but the thing is, and George MacDonald says this, you can't go wrong, people.
Where will I go to escape from his presence? If I ascend to the heights someday, or death to
Go,
Hades?
PVK. What do you want to say? I want to hear.
Well, just, the wrong path. Well, how are you going to avoid it? And how are you not going to? It's just reality.
Right.
We go down wrong paths all the time. And you know how we discover they're wrong? We went down them.
Well, that's the point. The point is, like your question, you just have to live it. Like, so if you start living something, like you start going down, pretty soon it'll become obvious to you. And some of those paths smack you upside the head with a 2x4 and make it extremely obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm actually planning to write him an email. I did speak to him briefly because I knit him a scarf. And I knit it out of my Gotland wool. And the Gotland wool is the wool that J.R. Tolkien, he went on a walk one evening and he saw a flock of Gotland sheep. And they were under the moonlight and they're silver, okay? And he thought, oh, this is what the elven cloaks are going to be made out of. This wool, right? So the Gotland got this, little claim to fame through Tolkien talking about them in this way. And I thought, what better thing to hang around that man's neck than a Gotland scarf? So I knit him a scarf and I just went up to him and introduced myself and then wrapped it around his neck and told him how much I love and appreciate him. So, yeah. That was nice.
Well, what you said, Sherry, about once you get to the place of a Peugeot or a Peterson or Journey or a rock band, whatever the musicians that are still playing and whatever principalities called Boston now are playing exactly the same song they played in the 70s. It's an airplane. I live by an airport. And so I feel bad for Jonathan often because, he's been having to say the same thing again and again and again and again. And
yeah, that's why I think the Q&As are great, because then he can really just riff right off of what and it's also why I don't monologue it because I honestly don't do well in I appreciate people who can, like Paul and Luke and Gavin, but I would just find myself speechless because I'm very what's the word? My thoughts are seeded by conversation, Yeah. And so I do much better. Actually, I was reading a Substack from Carolyn Ross, who's part of the Dark Mountain Project. Like, I don't know if you guys have heard of Dugald Hine, and Paul Kingsnorth used to be, well, I think he still is part of that group. But she actually said that she doesn't write her Substack. She oh gosh, sorry. Gavin. She just prints letters that she writes to people, like her responses to someone in a letter, because she processes things better in conversation. So almost all of her Substacks are letters that she wrote to other people, And I thought, oh, good. I'm not the only one.
By no means. Well, and I think that's part of, hierarchies bind and blind. And so, and again, I still, there's people that are always thinking, oh, and it's a wonderful thing to think, I want everybody to enjoy what I'm enjoying. That's the heart of evangelism. That's the heart of anyone who's a dogmatist and says, I found something that's changed my life and I want you to have it. And I'm going to do my very best to give it to you, even if I really don't have any clue how to give it to somebody else, because I'm giving it like a gift and you're feeling it like tyranny. So if that's the case, you got to think about yourself. But anyway, this is why small is beautiful, and why I think in a lot of ways the little corner, if it's going to grow, has to continue to grow by being little. And what you said earlier, Shari, that the longer we spend together, there's sort of a natural tension that grows. And so then, because you've noticed that, Father Eric, and he kind of has his little group. They've kind of been more over a little ways away for a while now. And Grail Country is over here. And I mean, everyone, things are sort of separating a little bit, and sometimes by disagreements or fights or things. But, truth is, it's probably okay. Because it continues to both grow and stay small at the same time. And this is continual question about the church. And, Orthodox churches that are little tiny churches that are busting at the seams. Well, welcome to a blessed problem.
Yeah. Well, that I don't think that church bursts at the seams every Sunday, but Jonathan was at the liturgy. So I think a lot of people showed up for that reason. And not that he spoke or anything. He was just a parishioner, he was just there doing liturgy. But
that I think about that, Matthew Pajot had this great thing. I can't remember if he did this on Twitter, or maybe he talked about this when he came out of his yurt for a while and he started doing those interviews after he'd learned how to make sourdough bread. But he talked about how you can't consume the foreigner too quick, right? Because you can't assimilate it, and there's deep wisdom in that. And so he was relaying it to some of the things that are happening right now. But like, you talked about, I've gone to a couple of particularly the two Antiochian churches in Houston are absolutely busting at the seams. And they're also busting at the seams with the dream demographic, single men and women and young families, which is what everyone wants, right?
That's what was, I have to say, like, there were probably, I'm going to just make a rough guesstimate, but there must have been like 150 to 200 people at this conference. And what an interesting demographic. Like, there were people from all ages, people with canes. I'm like, what? People with canes are coming to listen to Jonathan Pajot? That's crazy. Mm-hmm. and then lots of young families, lots of single men and women. And it was it was great. It was really, I've already seen it. It's presenting this challenge. Like, they had 100 people in a catechism class. Like, think about, you're going to have 100 baptisms. I mean, that's explosive growth, even for a large mega church. So, so that's it. Yet I go to and by the way, I love it. And like, I'd probably be it. Like, but if I go to the Greek churches, they're empty by and large, which is very fascinating. As I saw the same thing. Now, I really am missing, since I moved to Houston, I liked my small little Greek church that was particularly very unfull on the non-Sunday services, because it was so much easier to connect, and you can find a way to find your way through a small church. The priest has a bit more time to spend some time with you. Like, there's all these things. And I think that's one of the other things that I think I keep coming back to, the loss of the Protestant vocational churches. Like, there were lots of Methodist churches where I grew up. And so they all had about 250 to 300. They used to have this sign up there, like they'd say who attended last, like how many people attended the Sunday before. And they would update it with these sliding numbers. But the pastor knew every family. Now, he was burned out because he went to hospitals and hospices and weddings and stuff to some extent. But you could manage a flock of that amount. And
We've kind of moved to where you almost have to be a mega to survive, but yet that mega doesn't allow for any shepherding the flock. So what an interesting time we're in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll see how the Orthodox handle it. I mean, we watched the Protestants 30 years ago with Willow Creek and Rick Warren and, you know, that movement, and some handled it well and some didn't. And it'll be the same with the Orthodox. Some will handle it well, and this kind of popularity is going to destroy some pastors and destroy some churches and destroy some people. It always happens.
We'll handle it well. We're the true church.
Well, the dynamic, everything exists within it, Paul, because so like I said, you have some that are struggling because particularly it's very obvious to me why the Greek church is struggling. Some Greek churches still do most of their service in Greek. And so that doesn't allow for English speaking people an easy entry in, and the liturgy is really important. But there's a reason why they do that, because the Bible was written in Greek, right? The liturgy was written in Greek. And also they would say, like, so for example, in the Gospel of John, it's not the word, it's the logos. And see, the logos is so much bigger and deeper than just saying the word, because I've seen people, I've been a part of this, where people hold the Bible and like, this is what became flesh. Well, yeah, kind of, but that's not really it. Like, the Bible's not the word that John was speaking to. He was mapping on this Greek depth because he was trying to show this thing. And so they have a really good argument. But for English-speaking people, they want to understand the liturgy, and so
Sounds kind of like sola. Sounds kind of like sola scriptura to me.
So there's this really good argument.
Totally.
So, and the other thing is, the Greek church is more progressive, and so they're losing more of their youth, right? And so they're going through this whole thing. And if you start seeing at the Greek elite, they're trying to push women deaconess, like, so that whole thing that's happening in the CRC is happening there. So you're going to have all these different, let's just call them different, blends. Like, so some are booming, others are dying. Like, it's got the whole thing in it. Like, I can see it, and I know that, like, I'm not here to teach them how to do anything, but I can't like see like, oh, I've seen this before, you know.
You know, it was funny because the priests, he made an announcement that I think it's next Sunday is the Sunday of Orthodoxy. Is that what it is, Lance? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, puppy. and he said they decided to all the churches to come together and celebrate it together, like all the different Orthodox churches in the area. He said, of course, not all of us are coming. It is what it is, you know. It is what it is.
And the church is richer because there are those really stubborn people that say it's not church if it's not in the Greek.
Mm-hmm.
And can't imagine anybody around the world saying it's not church if it's not in the Latin.
Yeah.
For those who didn't say it wasn't church if it's not in the Dutch or the Frisian. So there's a pattern there too.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. Speaking of church, I gotta open the church for the Bible study ladies. And I'm gonna bring my dog. I'm gonna be so happy to see my dog again. They love my dog.
What is your dog's name, Paul?
Her name is Rue. Roux.
Oh.
Her name is Rue. And she is a very bright dog. She's so smart. She learns so quickly, but she's got an excitability issue. So we'll see if this is something that she can master.
She's still young, right?
Yeah, she's 9 months old now.
Yeah.
So as she could be just an excellent service dog, or they've got the standards for service animals are very strict, obviously.
You want her to be a service dog? Is that the idea?
Well, so she doesn't actually belong to us.
Oh, I see.
We are puppy raisers for this organization.
Oh, okay.
And so we have her for about a year or so. And then she'll go into professional training. Mm-hmm. And if she passes, then she'll be a service animal for some disabled person.
Oh, nice.
If she fails, then we have first chance to get her back. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we absolutely love her, and she's a super smart. And we got this because I wanted to learn better how these dogs are trained.
Yeah.
Because once you learn the training, well, then you can train other dogs
Exactly.
too. So
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
it's been great. She's a great dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, y'all. Carry on. Yeah, get into
Thanks,
Gavin's
man.
story, Lance.
See, that's exactly where I was going. We're gonna stick the landing with people that saw the beginning. We teased
Yep.
Gavin, and now we're gonna kick to the finish.
Yeah, Gavin, Gavin wanted the spotlight early, and then it was denied him. And now he's got more wisdom. He's going to get the spotlight. He's going to say, I don't know how much of this spotlight I want.
Making me nervous, Paul.
Yeah, well, the spotlights should make you nervous.
I think the first time I went to Bridges of Meaning, it was after a Friday Q&A, and Nathan Orman, I was going to have words with you, and Nathan Orman, he did it instead. And then afterward, I'm like, he's being a little harsh. It's like, this guy's a pastor.
The number one complaint against me is I'm not harsh enough, which means that people haven't seen me in enough situations.
they just don't know you.
We see your good side.
If I would, because the view of me from my wife and the view of me over the internet, very, rather different things. So
Totally.
Oh,
Yeah.
Anyway, carry on, good people. Great to talk to you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Paul.
you
Thank
too.
Paul.
Have a good day.
Yeah. So Shari, were you listening? So Luke was talking about how we disagree well, and we were kind of parsing through kind of exclusion or whatever. And part of Gavin's story was he was kicked off the BOM.
Yeah.
And I've kind of heard you allude to it, and yet Gavin still stayed in this community and whatever, and then he's really become a leader, right? And so
Gavin reminded me of a will not. No.
Yeah.
It's just a hanger on. Some people were like trying to, get Gavin off. Gavin's like,
yeah. So Gavin, I would like to unpack that a little bit. Like when that thing happened, and then you still how it ultimately comes back into your journey here. Like, how did that moment, and then if you look back on it in hindsight, like that removal from the Discord, which quite frankly kind of broke out about a 50-50, like even on the Discord after that happened, like, or was this 50-50, like actually maybe a little more like, what are you doing with Gavin sort of thing. But how did that play a role in kind of your transformation in your journey here over the past 3 years?
Yeah, I was glad to be connected to Grim Grizz and Jacob Facciarecci.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I'd said earlier. I'd said it's nice if you're going to exile someone. It's nice that they have a place to go. They kind of know where they can go, and that it's nice that there's a way to come back, right? So if there's a path back, some kind of redemptive path. But yeah, I'd say it was important that there was a relationship with Grim Grizz and Jacob.
Yeah.
Because without that, I don't know if I would have hung around.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's important that we.
Jacob's like, the enemy of my enemies is my friend.
Well, Jacob says, like, I wanted people to kind of take my side, but Jacob says Joey's great, so it's like, okay.
Which what? And again, like my opinion is like I disagree with it, but I didn't really comment on it at all, because what I realized was like that was Joey's server that he was cultivating, and he had every right to do what he wanted to do with it. And so again, like, so I didn't get a lot of the back and forth. Some people were very angry with it. So when you look back on that now, do you see that as a benefit though? As you look at like maybe some of the things you were doing, do you see maybe I would have done something differently? Or is there a learning that you took from that for yourself that you applied, or do you still look back on that and think, that was kind of BS?
I'm always going to try to learn something. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say it's both. I still think it was a bit BS, and then I also think that it was a learning, right? But but I know I was in the wrong on some things, and then I know I was in the right in some things. It's like I wasn't completely wrong.
Gavin, I want to ask you what you think of this comment from Phlebas.
Unfortunately, Gavin is a story that says we can only integrate you if you become one of us. Well, I still haven't been allowed back in Bridges of Meaning, right? So, but it is an interesting thing to consider. It's like, yeah, do you have to become like the flock, in order to,
Well, I would say that you got integrated before you became one of us. Like there was you were very active in conversations, not on the BOM, but I don't consider BOM being integrated.
Well, I think a big point, something I misunderstood was like, I thought it was Paul Vanderklay's Discord server, right?
Yeah.
And so.
No, I did too. Me too. I thought that.
Yeah. Bridges of Meaning is not this little corner of the internet. There's just a lot going on. And so and that's not Paul's Discord server. That's Paul's friends, trying to provide a service for Paul and the community. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a thing that I had to come to grips with. Right. So I was confused to a degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, so I was never I was exiled out of Bridges of Meaning, but I wasn't exiled out of the Broken Clock, the Discord server, or Jacob's Ladder, or having conversations, with Chad, so Chris Pical. So I was able to continue having conversations with people.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember watching one with you and your wife. That was a long time ago.
Rando's United with Jeff. There's these platforms, so we can provide platforms for people to build connections. And so like Jeff and Rando's United has done that as well. He's like one of the most silent, unrecognized people
silent
that lurks
partner.
Around.
Silent partner.
I'd be curious what one of us means. Like Phlebas, what did you mean if you become one of us?
I don't think he's making that. I don't think Phlebas is saying this is a good thing.
Well, so
no, I know that. No, I agree.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to flesh this out. What does he mean, one of us?
Well,
Christian?
Yeah. I'll let.
That's not true.
I'll let Gavin.
He's not Christian.
No. So I was the kind of person who would come in and start pointing out errors. I'd say, "Oh, you've got a Discord server which will very quickly exile someone without any kind of review process or a way back or any kind of collaboration and no conversation. There was no judge or jury and ability to put forth evidence. So I was actually saying that, and then it happened, right? It happened. And so to Phlebas' point, it's like, there are places where you go, and if you come in and start attempting to love and say, here's errors, and maybe you don't do it well, and I know I didn't do it well, but you're loving in your own way, and maybe even having more arrogance and pride than you should have, right? I wasn't perfect. I'm still not. But you get kicked out. There's places where you get kicked out if you're just not developed enough, you're still too childish, something like that. So that's how I would interpret what Phlebas is saying, is that, and my whole goal is that I was like, can we create a space? I'm just a nerd. I was in government club, and I'm like, hey, we can play government club. We can actually create judges and juries, and we can have election systems. We can do some cool stuff. And I'm a nerd who enjoys stuff. I have this math book, but most people don't care about that stuff.
I think this is an interesting comment. Phlebas said, it seems like transformation is always required, which is maybe why people are so mad at 70-year-old Hanselman. Interesting.
Well, it just depends on, people are being influenced. There's a peer pressure, there's a flock, there's some shepherds, and everyone's being influenced by this stuff. And I think
go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, I can totally see where Phlebas is coming from. I understand what his you know, what he's thinking about. I wish he would jump on, because I have talked to Plebis on in a Zoom, and it was great. But and it's not true, right? Like, there is a certain, you have to conform, right, in order to and I don't know in what ways you're willing to conform, but in some area you have to make some kind of decision about conforming in order to participate, right? Like
Right.
In anything. So
Right.
you do have to become one of us, right?
And that can be hard for some people too. Like
Yeah.
for me, it's like, it's nice if you were giving me the rules. Like, so for example, like I've said in the past, is like, I'd love to come into a house and just have the house's commandments, you know, so I can just know, like, I don't want to have to try to figure this thing out on the spot, you know?
Yeah.
And this is one of my criticisms. I was like, why don't we have rules? Why don't you tell me what the
I
rules
remember
are?
that.
Well, and I think it goes back to
Oh
what we talked about at the beginning, right? Which is this sense of we talk about the beef only thinker. Like, to some extent, I think the thing, like Paul has mentioned this over and over, and I think it is what binds this little corner is love, right? And so that's kind of what it's founded on. And then the ultimate thing that Paul models and how he's colonized everything is, how do you have good faith conversations, right? So I think the one of us is primarily, can you, at its heart, we're trying to, and go back to Hesy's comment that God is happy because he sees his children playing well together, right? And having fun with each other. I think there's some, like, one of us is just, can you come in here and have a good faith conversation? That's ultimately the biggest thing that surrounds, I think, what Paul models, and what that would, to me, be what the one of us is. And Grim pointed it out in his live stream yesterday, but it's like the reaction, and I think Paul even touched this, the reaction when T-Grog finally showed up on the video, and there was all this like cheering and stuff, that he jumped out of the comments and in, like,
Right.
it's like we want to see other people come in, and so on and so forth. And even if they, even if it's a little contentious, and maybe they're a little bit of a beef only thinker, at the beginning, is we would, hopefully over time that would become, not that you would agree or you change your mind necessarily. And in fact, in many ways that won't happen, but there's an understanding, and there's a way that we can have a dialogue and a conversation.
Well, I think there's some wisdom in that Matthew 18. Like, I didn't understand that when I went into Bridges of Meaning. It's like, I just created, public video, criticizing, right? So it's like, I didn't understand that, it might be wise to try and have a private conversation, with your brother or something like that. And I didn't know that, and maybe if you had told me, I'd just say, oh, you're wrong, but that's where I was.
Mm-hmm.
But
this might sound unrelated, but I don't know. I'm just going to throw it out there because it just keeps sticking in my mind. But I used to live years ago. I used to live in a house full of hippies. We all slept on mattresses on the floor and smoked a lot of drugs and did all that, right? And we all really loved each other, but we had our difficulties. Like, for example, there was a married couple amongst us, and they had a fridge that had this huge chain on it and a padlock, because most of us in the house were broke and we were always stealing food out of their fridge. So they were buying all this food, Anyway, but we would get together almost every Friday night, and we would play charades, and we would always play this game. And it was just, I'm just thinking about it now. We'd always play. It wasn't just any charade. We had to imitate somebody in the house, and then people would guess who it was, right? And so what that game afforded was that I could highlight the thing that stood out to me about Darius or Kip, or Marcus or Donnie or Rochelle or, whoever, right? And then sometimes you would find out that never stood out to anybody, just you. So you're doing this thing and nobody's getting who it is, right?
Right.
And then, or everybody goes, oh, that's Donnie, you know, kind of thing. And then we all laugh, right? And so it's this, and it was really bonding, right? It was really bonding because you could criticize the person, because that's essentially what you were doing by highlighting some of their, you know, what do you call those? Idiosyncrasies, right? But you were also criticizing yourself because you were finding out what it was about them that dug into you, you know? And then everyone would just kind of bind it all together with a big applause or laugh or hugs or whatever, you know? And you would find out about what people thought about you too, because like your blind spots were revealed, right? Because you're like, what? I do that?
Right.
No, I did that. You know, anyway, I think that's, I don't know why I was thinking about that game when you were talking.
Well, it makes sense. Like there's, you know, I'm a strange character on the internet, and like that's what we all are to some degree. And every new person that comes in is some strange character, and we start off as some weird pseudonym with some weird profile picture, and you know, who knows who they are? Like it's a true stranger. Could be your best friend, could be your worst enemy. You don't know.
Yeah.
It's a little scary, you know. So I'm pretty sure I came off as scary. You know, who knows who I am? And then to your, I mean, it crossed my mind, and you guys are talking about, it's like, maybe this is a game I could play with my children. Maybe this is a game. There's a way to play this game. There might even be a wrong way to play this game. Like I might actually would imitate, like my fear would be that I would imitate someone and it would strike a chord with them that it would be taken the wrong way.
Yeah.
So,
that's always the risk that you take when you play the game.
This being exiled is not a first. I've had it happen before. I've had it happen in relationships. It's happened throughout my life. And it usually comes with having said something that's probably a sharp truth, and it's a little too sharp, you know?
Yeah.
And it was said the wrong way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I get that. I think we've all been there, actually, you know. I know I have. Like I know so many places where I say something and everyone just kind of stares at me like I just arrived from Mars or something. And I'm just like, what is happening? Right? I have no clue what's happening. So I get it. Yeah.
But, you know, to be fair, I wasn't actually, I cared more for things like mathematics and technology and things than I cared about people. Right. That's why I would be scary, and why people would divorce themselves from me, you know? So I understand. I understand why it happened. So,
yeah.
It is scary when you come across someone who's just not caring for like how people feel and people's feelings.
You know, here's a story I think that relates to this, but in a very concrete way. So I was like 14 years old. And I've always been, let me just say this. I've always been the justice girl. Like if I could be a superhero, I'd have a big J on my suit, you know, justice for all kind of thing. And
Justice warrior?
Well, I wouldn't call me that, but you know.
Yeah.
The thing that really got me going was when someone was treated badly. Like that just really would get me going, right? And I also never really understood envy and, you know, hatred that came out of envy, that kind of thing. So anyway, I'm 14 and I go to this dance, and there's a boy there, and he asked me to dance, and I was like a wallflower. Okay. Just like nobody asked me to dance ever. And this was like every Friday night in our town, there was a dance, you know, at this church back in the good old days. And so I danced with him, and I was just thrilled, of course, 14 years old. And then he asked me to dance again. And I was like, what? You know? And then this girl came over to me, and I knew her. She lived a couple houses down from me on my street, and it was a group home for juvenile delinquents. And she was about 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 250 pounds. Okay. And her name was Beth, and she was constantly being thrown down. Like we'd see her in the front yard with one of the social workers on top of her, right? Like she was just really aggressive. And she came up to me and she said, "Don't dance with that guy again." And I said, "What? Why?" "Because I want to dance with him." And so I'm like, "Well, does he want to dance with you?" You know, like that was my first thought.
Right.
And it was asked in total innocence,
Right.
you know? And because I thought, well, if he wants to dance with her, then I won't, right?
Right.
And she goes, "Well, he never asked me." And I said, "Well, okay." So I'm doing the math, right? I'm like, well, if he never asked you and he's asking me, then he doesn't want to dance with you. He wants to dance with me, right?
Right.
So I said, "Well, he doesn't want to dance with you, Beth." She goes, "If you dance with him again, I'm going to beat the shit out of you."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I'm going to dance with him if he asks me." And
You're braver than me.
And then she said, so anyway, he came up to me and he asked me to dance with him. And, you know, like I didn't feel courageous. Just what she was talking about was so illogical to me that I couldn't wrap my head around it. Right. And so he asked me to dance and I danced with him. And then right away she came up to me and she goes,
Boom.
outside. Right. And I said, okay. So I went outside. We're in behind the church. Right. She's just like a bull in a, you know, and I said, just one thing, I'm not going to fight. I said, you can beat the shit out of me, but I'm not defending myself because I don't see a reason for this. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely illogical to me. And so she beat the shit out of me, literally, like badly, you know? And then one of the chaperones came out and saw what was happening and hauled her off, you know, patched me up. And then I went back into the dances, all swollen. But I'm telling that story because why am I telling that story? There's something about your story, Gavin, that reminded me of that. Like, you know, like even though it was all very illogical to you, you just remained in your place, in the place that you found yourself in, right? And I think, like, to look at your story, to hear your story, and I think that was courageous too. I think it was courageous of you. But it didn't come from a place of, okay, I'm going to beat this system. I'm going to, you know, it was just like, what's going on? I don't get it. How come, right? And it somehow carried you through the whole thing. I never felt any animosity towards Beth. I've never felt any animosity towards her, ever. Which is like, has always kind of blown my mind, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk some more, but I have drank 2 of these and I need to step away for a minute. I'll be back.
I think it's one of the things I was thinking about, Shari, when you talk about you were the justice girl, right? But then you come full circle and you read the justice sermon, right? And in full circle, you are the justice girl. I believe that justice and mercy are simply one and the same thing. Yes. Without justice to the full, there can be no mercy. And without mercy to the full, there can be no justice. Yeah. That such is the mercy of God, that he will hold his children in the consuming fire of his distance until they pay the uttermost farthing, until they drop the purse of selfishness with all the dross that is in it, and rush home to the Father and the Son, and the many brethren, rush inside the center of the life-giving fire whose outer circles burn, I believe that no hell will be lacking which would help the just mercy of God to redeem his children.
You know, this is the thing. Like I knew Beth. I felt sorry for Beth. She didn't have a family. You know, she was very aggressive because she was very sad, you know, and I just knew that whatever was happening at that moment it wasn't Beth. It wasn't her. It was coming from somewhere else, right? So, yeah.
That felt good.
How do you spell relief?
Oh yes. Oh yes. You thought I was very nervous for your story.
I don't know if that resonated with you at all, but yeah.
Well, I like the idea that we have blind spots, and so we each have kind of insights and blind spots. You know, Beth would have had her own insights and blind spots as well. I like that. I think that should resonate with everyone, honestly. And then the sticking with it part, it's just, I don't know. I'm a very determined person, and I don't know. I've been wanting to help with peace on earth since I was like 17 years old. So
You're a justice guy too. Yeah. 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 And that will give you courage, right? When that's what you want. Like,
it's
and
more
then
like
it
an
doesn't-
obsession. It's like I'm kind of obsessed with it. It's like
totally. I can relate to that, Gavin.
when I left missile defense, I was like, I was told, oh, that took so much courage. And Kim and I, we want to talk about that part of our lives, where I basically, left a job making good money and tried to pursue creating my empire, and so we, struggled financially and things like that. And it was good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't courage then either. It was just like, hey guys, it was more like I had to try this other path. This other path looks more promising, and so
Right.
Sticking around here looks like the best place to be. Like, I could go play World of Warcraft and consume Netflix, it was better to try and continue maintaining relationships with people who are trying to play some new game that had the potentially meaningful outcomes for people.
Right. Yeah.
I connected with a guy, Jason Delport. He's got the convective heat engine, and it's like I met him through Karen Wong. It's like, so there's like real relationships being developed, and
totally. Yeah.
way better than the stuff I found on Facebook. I reached out to people on Facebook. I'm like, hey, do you want to actually talk about this issue where you feel strongly about and where we disagree? And no, there was no interest in conversation. So
No. Yeah, people have enough trouble in their own lives, right? They don't want to invite it on Facebook. They're just like, no, this is where I zone out.
People are often just kind of repeating. So everyone's kind of, I like this metaphor of the flock or the school of fish. And it's like we all can end up finding ourselves in some kind of a flock or school and being shaped. And then you might just be someone who comes in or finds a place where you could just like emit whatever you're being told in your bubble. And you don't necessarily want to have that thing challenged.
I actually think that the reason that we are so mesmerized by watching a school of fish like move in unison or a murmuration of starlings is because they're showing us what the body of Christ is. That's what they're showing us. That's what we could be as human beings. We could be that. We are that. We just don't. We're not manifesting it the way they do. But there's a great. I love watching starling murmurations on YouTube, and there's a really great one where there's a bunch of people and there's a huge flock and they're doing all their formations over this water, and then suddenly some guy goes, "That was a bird," and so in the video they slow it down And there's just this brief, like, millisecond where the whole flock forms a bird over the water, you know?
That's cool.
Just gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, I feel it.
Yeah.
What is it? Pylo erection?
Pylo erection. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy.
But I came in saying me. To your point earlier, I really like it. It's about us, not about me. And I came in with a lot of me. And I mean, I don't want to dismiss the fact that I'm very good at math and software engineering and these things, and that I have disagreements with Mark Lefebvre on technical issues where to the unlearned may think that Mark knows what he's talking about, and he actually doesn't. So, but that's geek land, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I really like doing, and I have skill in it, a lot of experience in it. But and I think it's valuable. But you know, there's a lot of other valuable things. I don't get poetry. I just don't get it. But I imagine that if I were to start reading this book on mathematics, it would feel for others the way that poetry feels for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. And I think the language of mathematics is a kind of poetry, actually, because it's about relations, right?
It's about relations. And then you can end up with a formula that might be something like an icon. I mean, Luke talks about an icon. It's like
exactly
the amount of effort that went into this ability to understand or to have an equation to describe the relationship between objects.
Well,
like,
it's a language.
We don't have to do any of that effort. We just have this equation, this model, and it works. And we don't have to think about it. We just use this sign or this symbol, and it works. It's so powerful. It's connected to so much behind the scenes and so much effort that some people had to go through to do it.
Mm-hmm. So, in response
I'll let you guys bring this home. I've got to head out and walk a dog.
I'm going to have to go soon too, actually.
Yeah, whenever you're ready, I'm fine with soon.
I just wanted to answer Mark's question about the body of Christ. We are the body of Christ, Mark.
Shari's answer.
That's my answer. Well, I mean, that's what the scriptures tell us.
Yeah, I heard and this is the things like, do I mention the person who said the thing? Because I know the person, but there was a comment about there needs to be we need to be doing some eating of bread and drinking of wine. That's and so some people feel that way about it being a true body of Christ. But I mean, communion for me is this. It's just like dialogos. It's this taking turns, being vulnerable and allowing someone else to kind of really take your mind, and then you take turns doing this very intimate, vulnerable thing together. And so when like Mark Lefebvre talked about the intimacy crisis, it's like it's connected to dialogos and communion and this thing that we can try to do. And perhaps when we're doing it, when two or more gather in my name, maybe that's the body, right? So I don't know how much it has to do with the bread and the wine, but that's what it feels like to me.
Well, I talked about that in yesterday. I think it was yesterday's live stream. How entering into the center. I mean, one of the I like to keep things simple, you know, because I think that these things are actually simple. They're not mathematical equations, right?
If they weren't simple, that'd be a bad thing. Like,
right.
This needs to be available to all.
Right. You know? So like when we sit down at the dinner table with our families, you know, and I just said earlier, most of them are our enemies. You know, like they're armed with a lot of inside information, right?
There's also conflict of interest. I like to define enemy as when there's a conflict of interest. And I'll find myself having conflicts of interest with my family.
Like, honestly, you know, I've thought a lot about the family as the arena for, you know, iron sharpening iron kind of thing, learning to love your enemies, all that kind of. And I mean, if you think about it, and I wouldn't recommend thinking about it too hard because it's one of those things, it's like it starts to sound weird after a while. But if you think about it, you know, you love most of your family members in spite of what you know which is like kind of miraculous. Like you can't help but love them, right? Like you just love them. But there's things there that you're just like, they're your stumbling blocks, right? But anyway, I was going to say about the center and eating bread and drinking wine. That's what we do at the dinner table. We come together, right? And we share food, and that food has been sacrificed for us, right? And we partake of its body. We put it into our body, and it gives us life. It becomes incarnational, right? It moves into us and it becomes alive. And we do it because we love one another. We don't want the other person across from us to die for lack of food. So we share it with them, right?
I think we also become the bread, that which nourishes the blood.
Yes.
and
that's what I was saying. It's incarnational. Like it comes into us and it gives us life, right?
Well, even as part of a larger body, I think we become
without
that too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just really keeping it simple. So without that food, we die.
Right.
Right. And so we can't produce any offspring. Like, like it's not rocket science.
But, yeah. Maybe I'll end it with something that was just a funny anecdote. Is I hadn't really ever had this happen, but the other night I was sleeping with my arm like this, and I woke up and I found a dead man's hand on my face, and I was a bit frightened. I'm like, what is this? And my entire arm had gone dead, and it couldn't control it, and I couldn't feel it.
Oh, that's crazy.
I told Kim, I was like, my arm went dead, and she just giggled. She didn't remember me saying it, but she had that happen to her leg one time. So
yeah,
but yeah, the blood flow, the nourishment, it's important for the body.
Yeah, and it only happens when we cut it off. Like when we cut off that flow, right?
Right.
That's when we kill it.
When you were talking about X's, like I was trying to ask myself, how many times have I become an X, something that for which I am, against the X? It's a very rare thing for me.
Honestly, Gavin, like I had a really, I have a lot of reasons to be an obnoxious ex-Calvinist. Like really, I do. And but what happens to me in that scenario is I'm frozen in time. I'm static. I'm no longer becoming, right? And George MacDonald talks about the freezing people in time with our hate, right? And we hate because we cannot love them, is what he says. And when we cannot love them and we hate them instead, we freeze them in time, right? And they become an idol, right? And we can do that to ourselves. Like we can freeze ourselves in time through hatred and bitterness and anger, and then we never mature out of that place.
I get it.
We never do. Yeah.
I get it. It might be complicated for some people to understand, but I think I get it. I think I've experienced it. It's like the that which is not the Holy Spirit, noticing it within me, and then just kind of noticing what it does to me. I do think though that we have to give people enough time and space to get that out of their system. Like when you feel like you've been betrayed or, someone has hurt you badly, you have to grieve your way through that.
you know,
Yeah.
and that part of that process is anger. And I think we have to listen, you know?
Yeah, I think you can also like you can go and share your anger with God, right? It's
Yeah.
like I think sometimes you might, I don't know, the feeling I've had is that I'm ashamed of the anger, or I'm ashamed of whatever it is that's in me, instead of expressing it, you know.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, expressing it, getting handling it carefully.
Yeah. Well, like Paul said earlier, you know, we might take the wrong route, but we don't know it's wrong until we take it.
But it's yeah, it's interesting how we all do different paths. I like climbing, like rock climbing, and then
Mhm.
there's things like route setters, and on a route you have a crux, the hardest part on the route, and then depending on the difficulty, you might have a few places that are a little bit not as hard as the crux, but
Right.
so there's all kinds of routes. But
I,
that's
I
interesting.
like to I like to think, because I'm a universalist, okay, I'll just qualify this statement, but I like to think that we're in like a labyrinth. You know, it has one way in and one way out, right? And then there's a ton of dead ends. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what my life feels like a little bit. You know, I was
I would,
born, you know, I took all these little routes. You know, sometimes I went around the corner and I met up with the main path, and that was great. Other times I went around the corner and I hit a dead end, and I'd turn around and go back. But I'm very confident that I will make my way out of the labyrinth, right? And
right.
and we are blind, like we're you know, we really are just blindly making like tapping our way, you know, through this thing called life.
And you can freeze. There's things that can cause you to freeze as you're trying to navigate.
Well, the worst thing to do is to hunker down at the end of your dead end and just despair, which happens too,
Right.
right?
Well, there's the Great Divorce. I listened to it recently, and I was just it was interesting to me how this idea of like a praying for the dead, this idea of I don't know, what do they call the place, but the in between place, or between heaven and
Well, in
hell.
Catholicism, it's purgatory.
Yeah. Well, the concept of a place like that was interesting, and I got down a rabbit trail. I was like, well, why is it different between the denominations? And then I discovered it's like, oh, there's different Bibles.
Oh, yeah.
There's this thing called Maccabees, and it's not in some Bibles. And then there's a Maccabees 1 and 2, and then there's a Maccabees 3 and 4, and like just excluding one book from your Bible might change your view on whether or not your path, that labyrinth, might continue on after death.
Mhm.
Right. So
Yeah,
pretty wild.
it is.
So
It is definitely. That's a whole other conversation, Gavin.
I mean, it's connected to the universalism, I think, or
It
at
is.
least that's in my mind. It's connected. So,
Yeah.
but I'm going to need to get going soon.
Yeah, me too. It was great talking.
Thank
And
you, Shari. I don't think we've ever
we've never done this, and I'm
had this
really,
kind of.
really, yeah, we should do it more often, Gavin.
Yes, I enjoyed it. Thank you,
Yeah,
Shari.
you're welcome. Talk to you later. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thanks for joining us.